And what I started to realize is you can choose with this gift you have of leadership to go down a really positive path and help people in a positive way along, what that is and how that is. And I think that's what helped me really recognize and nurture my own kind of innate ability to show up.
There are so many people out there that are listening to this and watching this where they've been made aware in the past of where they maybe might want to change their behaviors to become even better at what they do and fulfill their potential. And the awareness is great, but then actually doing something about it, changing those behaviors that have been so ingrained for so many years and led to our success to that point.
I took it. I didn't know what I was truly walking into. I just knew that was a pathway and someone believed in me. That was enough. It didn't matter how much education I had. It didn't matter the titles I possessed. I knew I had a gift. I could move a room, Andrew.
Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Confession of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. Today, I am delighted that Dr. Donte Vaughn has joined me in the studio. Donte, welcome to the show.
Andrew, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I believe you're on the west coast of the US today, so great to have you. And the audience really wants to get to know our guests, so please just tell us a little bit about yourself and where your current focus is.
Awesome. So I am Dr. Donte Vaughn. I am the founder and president of Litepoint Advisors, LLC. We are a strategic advisory and leadership development firm. I mean, we specialize in helping organizations realize their greatest potential and how they lead the organization. So anything in the area of workforce management, organizational development, most importantly, leadership development, really digging into how leaders engage, how they interact, how they make decisions in the business every day, and how that impacts the business. That's at the root of what we do. It's underpinned by IO psychology and other principles of organizational leadership. And that's really what I specialize in and all of the advisors as part of my team. But that's the professional side of what I do. The personal side is I'm a resident of Georgia in the United States, but I am born and raised out of Philadelphia. I have a wife and a son, and large family on both sides. And it's those experiences that have shaped who I am today and who I likely will be in the future. So they mean everything to me and is really at the heartbeat of why I do what I do. But I'm sure we'll get into that.
Absolutely. And I know when we spoke a while ago, we also talked about the challenges of entrepreneurs and founders and how sometimes we can really work hard. What is it you do to play hard? What is it you do to switch off in your personal time?
You know, that answer would have been different in my 20s. It would have been different in my 30s. The answer in my 40s Absolutely. Now is really grounded in family. You know, it's amazing as you get older, especially in our world of entrepreneurialism and the grind and the that comes with that. I value peace and I value peace of mind. So for me, I look for things that are fulfilling spiritually, emotionally, physically. I enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy traveling. If you give me sun, sand, and a beer in my hand, I'm probably pretty happy, especially if I'm surrounded by family. So travel's a big part of my life, especially because my better half is of West Indian descent. So we have family all over the Caribbean and just internationally. So that gives us an opportunity to disconnect from day to day. So I enjoy that. Just being grounded. You know, I don't have high demand or complexity in what required helps me play hard, so to speak, right? It's just give me good time, good music. I enjoy football. So you'll catch me at some NFL games, have a really small social circle, but we all enjoy similar things. So.
Well, let's talk about family, because you raised how important it is to you. What I love about this show is that all of my guests have something to say about how their earlier years in life, shaped by family experiences, role models, really inform their leadership style, particularly in their 20s and 30s. So tell us a bit about your background, Donte, in terms of when you were growing up and how it shaped your leadership style.
Sure. When I think about my personal experiences, so I'm the outcome of a very common scenario, especially among certain communities and urban communities. I grew up in the city of Philadelphia, and was raised by my mother. At the time, my biological father, while I have a great relationship with him now, he wasn't always present on a consistent basis, and so that created some voids. My mother later met the gentleman who would become my stepfather, but those periods of my life really shaped this connection between how individuals show up in your life and serve in this leadership capacity. And it wasn't always in this formalized way. But part of that upbringing, you're navigating an urban community, you're trying to find ways to not become a statistic, to stay out of trouble. And while my mother always advocated for academics and I always thrived in that, I still was immersed in environments where it wasn't always guaranteed that I was going to go the right path. They had, cliques and groups that, I found myself trying to navigate. Okay, if I go this way, I may not end up in a good path. If I go this way, I may be okay, but I'm not sure. But there was a fascination that I always had with these different groups. I found myself being able, as young as I can remember, almost being more like a chameleon. And it was a way of protection and ensuring that I kind of stayed out of trouble. So I'd get with the group that you wouldn't assume that I would be with. I mean, these are kids who were not following good paths and they would stir trouble in school. But I found myself, instead of avoiding those groups, finding a way to integrate myself in a way that kept me protected. And I would be fascinated by how people would show up in those groups. Who's the leader? Who are the followers? Who are the people who have the greatest influence in the impact? And what I started to realize is you can choose, with this gift you have of leadership, to go down a really positive path and help people in a positive way along, or a negative one. In the same way that I could pivot with this, negative group, I played sports, so I could navigate a group of friends playing sports, just like I could navigate the group that was a part of the chess club. And I didn't realize I could make a career out of it as an adolescent, but it was like, man, these what I now understand as group and organizational dynamics were so appealing to me, but I navigated it solely through the lens of, where do I show up in that, and how do I show up, and then how do I understand what pathways? And it truly kept me out of trouble. And it enabled me to understand my community in a different way. So that's really at the foundation of my interest in organizational dynamics. But the other side of that is, while my relationship was strained with my father at a young age, and then I had my stepfather who I was trying to navigate and figure out what he meant to me as a figure in my life, I had these other figures and these other people who showed up, and it was subtle. Whether it was Mr. Prince, who led our football program at elementary school, or it was my uncle, who I was fascinated by the degrees that he had on his wall and the idea in the career path that he took, to watching my mother go back to school. These moments in my life really helped me recognize that people have a significant opportunity to impact you in a really positive way if they understand and can connect with what that is and how that is. And I think that's what helped me really recognize and nurture my own kind of innate ability to show up, excuse me, because I had a tendency to want to help, support, lead. That was in my nature as far back as I can remember. I remember reading old written report cards saying, Dante's really likes to help out in the class. I really appreciate him. He holds the door open. He does these things that wants to show up in this role. So really leaning in on that, I think, was at the heart of shaping this interest in leadership and how those leaders shape groups and how those groups are mobilized around that individual's vision and impact. So imagine the ripple effect in that. And that's really what set me on a path of now what is, leadership effectiveness.
And that insight that you were gaining at that point, as you've described, and also this ability to navigate these different situations, environments, groups, and also this ability to be chameleon-like within that. How was that in service of you in your 20s as a leader?
So by my 20s, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. And by my 20s, I was in undergrad. And for me, it was, what do I do with this gift? At that point, I had assumed leadership roles from the time I was in my teens, working in retail, to by the time I was in my 20s, I was in kind of a more mid-level leadership role in retail, overseeing. I had multi-unit oversight, but I didn't understand yet my real power. I understood how I could show up in a, kind of transactional way, but behavioral change and what's required, I hadn't quite connected with. And I was trying to still nurture this entrepreneurial itch. And you couple that with this desire to want to have greater impact, but not quite, not understanding how. And I cringed at organizational structures that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I think that's why I realized probably by my mid-20s that working in an organizational construct where I couldn't impact or inform the trajectory of that organization and how it impacted others wasn't going to work for me. Like, I knew very early on, at some point in my career, I was going to set out on this path to shape how we can impact business better, right? So prior to that, I kind of just said, okay, let me pursue a pathway from a leadership development standpoint that put me in positions where I thought I could have the greatest impact. So by the time I was in my late 20s, I was already a VP of sales and operations for a holdings company. I had a lot of ambition, a lot of drive, and I had, again, integral people who showed up in my life, mentored, coached, guided me, gave me a chance. Now, I can tell you through that, my first official kind of executive level position as a VP of sales and operations, that was the most transformative period of my life, because all that prior experience, I was so focused on growth and pursuit of something where I could have significant impact, that I didn't realize that through that effort, unless and until I acknowledged my insecurities, my vulnerabilities, my traumas, then I was never going to get to that next level. And I'll never forget when I became a VP, I worked with a woman, again, people showing up in your lives as a leader, knowingly and unknowingly. And I'll never forget, she was one of the first people to bring awareness to these insecurities I had. I finally had a seat at the table. I could influence the trajectory of this organization as the VP of sales and operations. But that manifested as oftentimes highly emotional, preachy, verbose, trying to get my point across, trying to get people to understand, trying to get people to follow my lead. And she said, listen, like, your insecurities are so apparent, and you have some great ideas at this executive table, but because of your delivery and your approach, and because of whatever has shaped your desire to assert yourself in such an aggressive manner, it's getting lost. And that was one of the most humbling kind of points of feedback I had ever received, because I had to do some serious self-reflection. And it was through that experience that I remember my advocates in that organization who advocated for me in those positions, the COO, especially. I remember him saying, hey, you could benefit from an executive coach to really help shape all this energy and tenacity and intensity you have behind yourself and what you're looking to do. And so that was my first visibility into the power of someone in this coach capacity. And I'll never forget my executive coach. Now, you would think that this is, this is a 65-year-old semi-retired executive coach who's like some white woman from Utah. I can't remember where she was from. Coaching this, wet behind the ears, 20-something-year-old executive, black young guy out of Philly. And you would think that, again, another transformative moment for me is you would think that dynamic wouldn't work. But on the contrary, we had so much connection and understanding, and she was able to nurture our relationship in a manner where she was able to understand me, and I was able to understand her. And we established a plan that aligned with helping me refine those areas of my capacity to leverage my power of influence. And now at this time, part of that effort, I think I started pursuing my master's. I had some great success post the coaching experience. And through that, we also did a 360 leadership assessment. Again, another transformative moment where I had visibility to how people received me or perceived me. Because part of my trauma was born out of distrust. I didn't trust people around me because I was so guarded. I didn't know if I could trust many people. So I often found myself overcompensating in other areas, limiting the capacity of others in some areas, all born out of something of childhood experiences that shaped this undertone of distrust that I had, that I didn't realize I had. And I remember getting my 360 review, and things that people acknowledged about me that I didn't even realize was a strength, they saw as a strength. The things that I thought were strengths, they saw as potentially limiting in their experience or in my own experience. Now, mind you, this 360 review, as you know, from the CEO all the way to subordinates. And I was blown away because I didn't even realize that I was channeling myself in a way that was protective of me, but limiting in my own light that I can shine on others. So it required me to really take a hard look at how equipped am I to operate with the level of authenticity and transparency around who I am and the potential impact that I can have by understanding someone else, right? So that was a significant moment in my life, in my late 20s, between the coaching, the 360 feedbacks, and again, along the way, people showing up, advocating, and being a part of this. But that was that period where I realized, wow, there's people who I had done consulting work, I had done some things already, so I knew that side of things, but this individualized impact that someone can have on your life, and this positive power behind vulnerability, authenticity, transparency. And that was something I didn't operate in. I wasn't raised to understand the power of, and frankly, put so many protections around myself, I wasn't equipped to show up that way. Now, fast forward today in my 40s, I very much lean on that side of, and my ability to have impacted others' lives. But anyway, you talked about my 20s, so I can tell you that those were the most transformative moments where I realized, okay, there's something here that I'm getting closer to really my purpose.
There's two things that have come up for me there, Donte. The first is you talk fondly about these figures, these individuals that come into your life at various times, and they come into all our lives at various times, but sometimes we don't see them or notice them or choose to receive them. Mm-hmm. So just tell us a bit more. What was it that was important there for you to be able to receive at that point? What was around you? Because so many people just don't notice them.
My desire to succeed was greater than my ego. And what I mean by that is I was willing to get out my own way because I believed that these were all potential pathways to succeed, to realize this vision I had for my life and what I wanted it to be. I still knew I wanted to have impact. I still didn't quite know how. So, hey, we see your contributions to the business and the work that you've done. We have an opportunity for you to take on this vice president role. Do you want to take it? Yeah. I took it. I didn't know what I was truly walking into. I just knew that was a pathway and someone believed in me. That was enough. I was like, all right, cool. Now, till today, I don't know. And now this is making me reflective that I need to do this because I'm still connected with these individuals. But I need to make sure I've been intentional to let these individuals know, to your point, thank you, because you believed enough in me to give me a chance. And I don't know if I ever actually formally said that. And even I still have relationships with these people. So anyway, that's just a moment of my own acknowledgement. But so I can tell you that it was the desire to succeed that opened me up to the willingness to at least try this thing if I believe that we're going to get me on some trajectory. Same thing with the executive coach. Really was just the openness of the premise of, hey, Donte, you probably should benefit. You could benefit from an executive coach for 6 months to a year to really refine you. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Did I understand the real power of an executive coach? No, I didn't. It was new. The concept of it was even new to me. Kind of heard in the peripheral that these people exist. So yeah, I would just say that my desire to succeed was greater than my ego.
Thank you. And the second point that came up as you were talking earlier, there are so many people out there that are listening to this and watching this where they've been made aware in the past of where they maybe might want to change their behaviors to become even better at what they do and fulfill their potential. And the awareness is great, but then actually doing something about it, changing those behaviors that have been so ingrained for so many years and led to our success to that point. So talk to us a little bit more, maybe what was most challenging about some of those behavior changes that you knew you had to go through to actually work on the awareness you'd gained?
Behavior change requires, to your point, acknowledgement, acceptance. So for me, part of the barrier is to first be highly self-reflective and honest with myself about the things that I had experienced, about my opinion of myself before I could ever get on any pathway of behavioral change and really leaning in to where my real power would be today. That was the most difficult thing because then it required me to open up bandages, old wounds, be honest about relationships, be honest and forgive myself for my own mistakes, my own failures, forgive others, right? Because all these things become white noise and barriers to really emerging into this transformative process for yourself. So for me, it started there, and it was very difficult. It took me on a spiritual journey. It took me on an emotional journey that many didn't know I was navigating because during that kind of late 20s, early 30s, to really unpack this complex kind of dysfunction that was shaping how I showed up every day. It didn't matter how much education I had. It didn't matter the titles I possessed. I knew I had a gift. I could move a room, Andrew. I could move a room from the time I was a child to did I know how to manifest that energy and that power in a positive way? Did oftentimes through trial and tribulation I felt stifled and minimized, that created insecurities for me along the way? Yeah, all those things. I just didn't lean into the reality of it. Oh, trust me, I've had my wife. I've known my wife since high school. So along the way, people who are closest to you who didn't who care about where you are and didn't take part in the trauma part of it can see you through a different lens. She tried to tell me, I didn't want to listen, but I would say that was the most difficult part of it, is accepting you have experienced challenges that have shaped you. Some were traumatic. You've been hurt. You may have hurt others. Like, these things you have to be really honest with yourself, because then it manifests in subtle ways in how we engage and interact and make decisions in our lives, personally and professionally. So once I did that and set boundaries after that, then it gave me some space to then say, okay, now I can accept it, because Donte, failure is okay. I tiptoed as an adolescent for fear of failure. I was steadfast in thriving, not because, but it was one, because I wanted to succeed, but also because I was afraid to fail. Not realizing that it's through failure that you have your greatest lessons, your greatest learning, your greatest impact. I didn't understand that. So, I could show you book. My mother kept a collage of all of our awards and report cards and all those kind of things. And you would think I was Einstein, yet hurt inside, damaged, insecure. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying that I had to acknowledge all those things. And then it became, okay, now I'm open to what's required. And the things that I thought people received really well that made me great were the things that I needed to acknowledge and address and get in front of. So, yeah, from there it was onward and upward. And that's a perpetual, continuous improvement process for the rest of my life. Right. But my openness to it is it's wide and deep in comparison to where I was, call it 20 years ago.
And that moves on to another concept which Shirzad Chamine talks about in his book Positive Intelligence, around the saboteurs, these negative thoughts in our head. And hyperachiever, is one of those that plagues a lot of entrepreneurs and driven people. So when he talks about the saboteurs being present, we're in judgment mode of judging ourselves, judging others, judging our situation negatively. And he talks about moving into the sage muscle and being discerning about our gifts, etc. So how do you now, at this stage of your life, keep those saboteurs at bay, because we all have them, to maintain this positive intelligence view of your life and your relationships?
I think my capacity to sustain my trajectory in the context of leaning into what I believe to be my gifts and the power of impact and influence I can have on others is grounded in partly what I shared, which is around this premise of authenticity and transparency. So I lean in on the failures as examples as I'm navigating both my strategic impact on an organization, but also in coaching and development of others. I use my story as a means to say, I've encountered many of those barriers that you've encountered. Here's what my learning was. So it allows me to control those insecurities versus allowing them to control me. I use them as a toolkit. So I don't allow it to manifest itself in a way that says, maybe I should hide behind this thing. No, guess what? I screwed up in this thing that I did earlier in my leadership role. or in my career. And let me tell you what led to it, and let me tell you how I was able to emerge from it. And let me tell you the implications of that, right? So I lean in on it. So I think that's one way that you keep these internal saboteurs or external ones at bay. You don't get to speak my narrative. I get to speak it. That means that same thing with what you tell yourself. My subconscious doesn't get to roam. I control that. I think the other side of that is also navigating the fear. What do I call it? Imposter. I got over imposter syndrome. Because I oftentimes post my late 20s found myself at the table, and I was often literally and figuratively the minority. And through that, I often saw either or heard comments or suggestions that I didn't belong where I was supposed to be. And it took until my probably mid 30s to recognize that I was exactly where I needed to be, deserved to be there. And in many cases, it was just a stopping point because I had because I was on a trajectory to something greater. But that took some time. And sometimes that imposter syndrome, you start to stifle your own light before fear that you're going to show up in a way that's offensive to others. And not recognizing that what you're set out to do is not for you. It's for the people you're supposed to impact. How dare you stifle your own light when it's meant to shine on somebody else or in their life in a certain way? It took me some time to recognize that. So those were the two things, really leaning in through the lens of transparency and about myself and my own failures, but also just getting over imposter syndrome so I could really shine in the way. And it's something I still work on. But I can walk into a room with a great level of confidence in knowing I belong there.
Thank you for sharing that. And that comes to a question around the audience that's listening to this and watching this, those leaders out there that can really relate to your story. What kind of advice would you give to them about how they can channel all those early experiences, whatever they were for that particular leader, into sustainable leadership over time?
Part of leadership is about connection. You manage systems, processes, resources. You lead people. So to lead people requires human connection. And true and authentic human connection requires a level of vulnerability and transparency. And it requires us all to then acknowledge these circumstances in our lives that have shaped or potentially shaped who we are, and really attempt to peel back the onion and unpack those things. Not for the sake of retribution or self-persecution, but for the sake of recognizing that these become tools. These things have equipped me. They have strengthened me. Even in the moment when I didn't believe it was intended to strengthen me. Even if I felt my lowest in the midst of those adversity moments, they now are bullets I have in the chamber, figuratively, that I can use to impact and in a positive way. So we have to go to those spaces and those points in our lives and really examine those things, because they've become really these conscious and subconscious barriers to our true capacity. The more honest we are with ourselves, the more equipped we are to lean into our greatest purpose, and greater alignment means we have greater opportunity to impact others around us. So I truly believe that it starts there. We've been shaped, we've been formed, especially certain communities, and even down to just the perception of how we should show up in society. We've been told that vulnerability somehow is a form of weakness, and I think we have to reshape our mindset around what that means. I'm really, and even as I work with our clients, and even when I'm addressing deeper organizational development and transformations at an individualized level, I still encourage individuals to examine how they show up, because personal accountability is where it starts. So I think that just has to be a part of this journey. We can't throw technical things at something without that becomes so personal, and I think we blend this leadership and management as, as how I say it, as not synonymous, but as synonymous. And when in fact, I believe they're the most effective managers are also leaders, right? And I think we have to understand that word leadership and that role that we assume, titles aside, is something that that comes with a responsibility and a commitment to self and to others. I always say leadership is not a switch that turns off when you walk out of the workplace. So how do I show up even for myself, like as a leader, and for my family as a leader, and in my community? Because it manifests itself in all areas of our lives. We go back to those people who decided to lean in on the leadership opportunity they had that shaped or influenced our lives. They didn't necessarily have formal titles or roles in our lives, but yet they still had an opportunity to lead us to something greater, in a small way or a significant way. So anyway, I just hope that individuals recognize that it has to start there.
I agree. And that moves us on to the final question for you, Donte, in terms of you and your future. So just share with the audience what it is you're going to be in service of in the near future, the next 5 or 10 years. And if people want to collaborate in some way or just find out a bit more about you, the best way to get in contact with you.
Well, Litepoint has become my passion in the work that I do in my cohorts. Litepoint Advisors is, our mission is truly to have this ripple effect as we talk about advancing leadership effectiveness. The catalyst we choose is Litepoint and through an organizational lens, but we recognize that power still exists in impacting those leaders, both strategically and as an organizational construct, but also on an individualized level. So we're doing that, and individuals who want to take part in that, all they got to do is Google us, Litepoint Advisors LLC. We're based out of Georgia, litepointadvisors.com. What I would envision is an opportunity to expand our advisory network, to take on initiatives with organizations who have an authentic, genuine, sincere desire to realize, either through transformation or optimization, the real power they have, because they've assimilated, whether it's 50 or 1,000 or 2,000 people, they assimilate every day to set them on a path to fulfill a purpose, a mission, a vision, a mission. The power in that, not just through their technical ability, but when we can tap into the leadership potential. It doesn't matter about their title. When we can tap into their leadership potential, imagine exponentially the impact that you can have on fulfillment of your purpose, your vision, and your mission. That's what we're about. So we're looking to work with organizations who desire to realize that. And we're looking to work with advisors, practitioners, individuals who see themselves as the change agents, right? I mean, that's what we do. That's what we set forth. So over the next decade, I want to be able to continue on that trajectory in a meaningful way, because I've never been as close as I am today to what I believe to be my purpose. And all those things that shaped and all those experiences I've had has equipped me in a capacity that now allows me to do the same for others. So I want to continue to do that.
Well, Donte, I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with our audience today with such passion, such authenticity, and such vulnerability. I know that many of the audience will have been inspired to reflect not only on their own leadership style of others, but also how they might be leading themselves. That was a clear message that came out today. So once again, Donte, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Appreciate you. Thank you for having me, Andrew.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, Just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favourite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.